Hey, yo, welcome to the best freaking college sports show on the internet. That's a name we just came up with this week for this show. I'm Josh Mancuso. This is not my brother, Caleb Mancuso. This is the one and only Yogi Roth. What's up, man?
What's up? What's up? I love the open, the intro, the crinkling of the paper, the title. Nice job.
You like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So honorable mention sports, right? This is like our little sports media company. And I don't know if you know this full story of why we named this little sports media company Honorable Mention Sports. Do you know?
No, coach me, teach me.
Okay. Well, here's how I don't like to brag. Well, I do like to brag, but so I'm going to brag. In high school, with the elite athlete that I was, as you know, Yogi, that I was a wide receiver and I was all conference honorable mention. So there was like first team, then there was a second team. There may have even been a third team, and then there was all conference. It was basically if you were a senior and you started, they just threw you in there.
Yeah,
So I honorable mention
I like
Sports
it.
Network. There you go.
Hey, there is a world where, like, moving forward, when you're an honorable mention, ultimately you just fall under the umbrella of like, I was all conference.
That's
Like you're all,
exactly.
I mean, you were all conference. You're on the list. Like I was all conference in the Big East academic team. Back to back years. So I'm like, I was all conference college football player,
You
academic
were
team, right? I mean, I have the
academic.
certificate somewhere back here.
Yes, you do. And I was
Yeah.
never all conference of any academics at any point. So you
There we
got me
go.
on
Look
that.
at us today.
Look, we're just so much bragging.
Yeah.
I got people coming in here. So if you guys have questions, Yogi Roth, a good friend of mine. We've been friends for a year or two now. I guess how long? A couple of years.
Yeah, I think we're 2, 3. I pushed 3. I think it's
I'd
like
say we're
first
in.
call, tried to
Yeah,
convince you to come to LA. You're still not here, but
not
at least
not
we're boys, so we're good.
we're still boys. Not yet, but stay tuned. We got a big year planned, Yogi. You might be driving a U-Haul truck across country for us.
Hey,
Uh,
I'm happy to hit record on like some dashboard camera and we could have a great conversation about honorable mention and college football. Let's go.
exactly. All my accolades from high school. That's great. So Yogi played college football at Pitt, right? The University of Pittsburgh, or is it Pittsburgh University? Which way does it go?
We're gonna go University of Pittsburgh, coach.
Okay,
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
that's proper. At Pitt, man, back not that long ago. I would say like back in the day, but it wasn't that long ago, right? Like when were you playing at
I
Pitt?
mean, we're in the 2000s. I was a freshman in the year 2000. So I did 4 years, did a 4-year stint, and then found my way out west and been out here for now 20 years, man. And just finished up year 17 of broadcasting. And it's kind of like, I feel like I could still play. Like, I feel like I could still be an honorable mention academic team if I had to
Yes,
be in the Big East, which doesn't even exist in football, but I'd find a way.
I love it. 17 years you've been doing sports like broadcasting. Wow.
Yeah. So I finished playing and went and played in Australia, which I'd highly recommend for anybody. I'm a big fan of international football, as you may know. Paris
Yes.
Musketeers just hired Jack Del Rio. I'm a minority owner in that team, which is really cool. So I believe in like the global power of sport. But I came back and started broadcasting, did a season, and then I joined Pete Carroll's staff out at USC and did 4 years on the staff. And it's really where I think I got like a PhD in offensive football from Lane Kiffin, who I know you know, and Steve Sarkisian in the conference that I know you're always suitably affiliated with in the SEC. And then also for Pete, I got to co-write his book, but also really understand how to lead and what it took to build an organization. I think as a young broadcaster, it gave me such a foundation to now when I walk into a team room or a facility, I'm interviewing coaches. I just think I have a different level of empathy for what the craft is, having done the craft, even though I
Yeah.
wasn't an offensive coordinator or anything like that. But being on the ground floor, to me, the most premier dynasty in, you could argue, the last 25 years. Some might say Alabama. It's a fun conversation to have. I still think doing it in LA is way more challenging than doing it anywhere else in the country, in any conference. It's not a knock on Tuscaloosa by any stretch, but it was just a unique foundational element for my life, which is cool. So now as I'm covering games or calling games, I still lean on that, man, of like how you see the game, the lens in which you see it, how you want to call it, how you want to illuminate, how you want to predict. And I'm really grateful for that as I get older and older in my broadcasting career, because I realized that foundation is really unique. A lot of broadcasters
Yeah.
have never been on a coaching staff. So you're
Yeah.
just leaning on your experience, which we all do. And I'm grateful that mine was a little more diverse than maybe others.
That's incredible, man. I love it. And you were with Pac-12 Network and then now Big Ten Network. covering a lot of games this season. Is there a game that you covered that just stood out to you this year, like that you were on the ground, you were there, and you're like, man, this was wild, or this was special in some kind of way?
Yeah, I think there's probably 3 that stand out in a beautiful way. One was like the opener, right? I got to, I'm a big fan, like you, in relationships. So my partners this year in the booth was Guy Haberman, and down the field was Rhett Lewis, 2 guys that are phenomenal at their craft. Rhett does a ton around the NFL. You probably know him. And, excuse me, Guy has been a voice in the media for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I've had longtime partners in my career. Ted Robinson, Hall of Famer, Kevin Calabro, Hall of Famer, Steve Physiak, Hall of Famer, like 3 G's in the craft.
Yeah.
And now I became the oldest guy in the booth, which was such a unique experience. And our first
Yeah.
game was at Oregon. If you remember the game, like it was a viral game because they almost lost to Idaho in the opener and then
Right.
went on this crazy run. And I'll always remember that because it was like Oregon's first game as a member of the Big Ten, a sellout crowd, a wild one. So that stands out. Then when I got into the season, to me, going to Nebraska was really, it was almost like a spiritual experience, man.
I bet.
Like people talk about it. I coached there back in 07 or 08. This was insane. Calling it, feeling it. Beautiful fan base, electric stadium. Them against UCLA was a back and forth game. UCLA ended up winning the game on the road, which you can imagine how challenging that is.
Oh, yeah.
Matt Rule has become a friend. So that one. And then I probably have to say USC at Minnesota. PJ Fleck, if you've been around him and his staff, and I've known Lincoln Riley for a while now, and obviously the SC program I have deep ties into. So calling that, it was kind of like Big Ten team on the road, another sellout. The sun was setting. It was just came down to the last possession, man. It was insane. Fans rushed the field. So those 3 amid like a glorious season. I think we had 8 games come down to the final possession, whether it was Big Ten Network or Fox, where we call them, that were just – you just kind of, the deal, man. Like, you're just really grateful for the opportunity to still, I live out my dream that I had when I was my oldest son's age. I can remember being in like the backyard shooting hoops, calling and broadcasting my own games. And now I get to do it again. So yeah, those jump out to me, man. It's a beautiful year, and really grateful for the people at the Big Ten Network that really embraced me and some of our new colleagues, and really just proud to be a part of that thing.
Man, I love it. You're one of the best at it, and I'm not just saying that because we're friends, but you're really good at your job, and so it's no surprise that you've been successful and that people still want you to keep doing stuff, and you'll be doing it for a long time, I'm sure. So somebody commented here, loved your comedy skits. I'm going to assume that one's for me and not for you, unless there's something I don't know, unless people are watching you report and they're like, this is funny. This guy's doing skits.
I hope it's you, bro. I hope it's you. That's for sure. I hope they're not thinking my game broadcast is a skit. But if they do, hey, coach me up, man. I got you.
Yeah, right.
Let me know where I could be better.
I love it, man. You're awesome. So awesome. And we've got we got some Ohio State fans in here. Joel Wilson, he's a frequent listener here. Joel, what's up, buddy? He says, welcome, the Ohio State University national champions. So he's excited, of course. And so let's go to the game a little bit, because I want to hear your thoughts on it. You said you were in studio in Chicago, but you were covering the game, obviously, and of course you got a Big Ten school that was in there as well. Ohio State, just, dude, so impressive. I'm going to go ahead and say that I was not a believer throughout the year that Ohio State was as good as they ended up being. I think they lost the game to Oregon, which was close. They almost won it, really, but they lost that one. But they played well. Didn't feel like their schedule was anything like insane. It was all right, but just wasn't sure if they were really going to be a team that could do it. And then they lost to Michigan, and I was like, oh man, like, I know it's a rivalry game, so you never know what can happen, right? Michigan, Ohio State, Auburn, Alabama, any of these games, you never know what can happen. But I was surprised they won. I thought, well, they may not have what it takes to go the distance. And then they just destroyed Tennessee. Then they destroyed Oregon. And then they just destroyed everybody on their way to a title game. And Notre Dame played them the closest of anybody. But, I mean, just what do you think about Ohio State getting it done, man? I mean, I'm sure you knew all along that they were it, right? But I just didn't think that was going to be the case.
I don't know. So Josh, in the training camps in August, the Big Ten Network thankfully sent me around to, I think, 14 of the 18 schools. Oh. And when I got to Ohio State, I've known Ryan Day for a few years. I've known Chip Kelly for man, 15 plus years,
Yeah.
just a dear friend, and a bunch of the guys on the staff. And you get to practice. And my thing with elite premium teams, I'm always comping them to what I referenced earlier about my time at SC. So I'm looking at the roster at Oregon, and then a week later, I'm looking at the roster of Ohio State, and a week later, I'm looking at the roster of Michigan, for instance. Look at 3 programs I saw in camp, and I'm saying, all right, what's the vibe of practice? What's the culture like? What's the competitive depth look like? And then, of course, like, what's my feel? You know, the scheme's going to be good.
Yes.
And my feel coming out of Ohio State was, I think it's the best roster I've ever seen.
Really.
Best I've ever seen. Now, granted, most teams at Ohio State in years past, it was 3 years and they were out because they went to the NFL. They're so talented. And I think that's almost like the blessing and the curse for elite recruitment. And maybe you miss out on that final year of development that a player might have. Well, now in the landscape we're in, as you know, in the NIL world, like, guys can return and it can be fruitful. And when you looked at the guys that chose to return, they were the core of a recruiting class 4 years ago that came with a mission. And the mission was to do 3 things: beat Michigan, win a conference title, win a national title. And you could feel that walking out of camp. Then you heard the messaging, which was leave no doubt. Well, as the season went on, I was probably more in your world where I was like, God, this team, to me, at times looked tight. At times I did have some doubt, whether that was Purdue game and it's 0-0 after 1, or Northwestern game, it's 7-0 after 1. You're just watching these games and you know Ohio State will win, but there's still a little bit of doubt. And my thing is, I believe that when you are premium and when you have tremendous expectations on you, you can go one of 2 ways. You can go attack that opportunity with, call it joy, if you want to steal a word out of, Steve Kerr or Pete Carroll, competitive joy. Or sometimes I call it exhale wins, where it's like, whew, we got through that.
We got it done.
And I felt like Ohio State a lot of times this year, it was exhale wins. And when they went through that Michigan game, as you referenced, and all the things that happened afterwards, they had this now famous team meeting that's probably going to be a documentary at some point. And I can remember at the Rose Bowl, because I covered this team pretty in depth in the playoff run. And I asked, I think for the first time on set with Jack Sawyer, I said, hey, tell me about that team meeting. And I didn't know what he's going to say. Yeah, I thought he could have said, we're going to keep that in-house. But he started talking about it. And then I asked Emeka Mbuka about it. He started talking about it. I asked Will Howard about it. And they all started talking about it. And they all said the same thing, which is, we walked out of there lighter. We walked out of there, our shoulders could drop a little bit. We walked out of there saying, like, yeah, let's just play for one another. Like, forget all of those expectations. And then boom, domination, great finish in the Texas game. And then, to your point, winning in the Natty. And that's what I saw this team like. And I believe that the expanded playoff gave an opportunity I don't think any of us could have predicted. And the opportunity is even more lessons are learned through the game of football because of this extended season. Like, Ohio State loses to Michigan, traditionally your season's done.
Right.
You're done. Like, you got a bowl game, but guys are going to opt out and away you go. Now, think of all the things these players learn. Resiliency, togetherness. When it gets hard, you can fray or you can unite. Like, all of these principles that they will carry with them 20 years from now as fathers, husbands, businessmen, leaders, you name it. And I just love that. I love that for this team. And Ryan Day deserves all the credit because he was the guy in the front of the room saying, this is how we're going to navigate this thing. So it was really a beautiful run, maybe one of one because of the roster that we saw. And I walked out of that game on Monday night saying, this might be the best team I've ever seen when I start comping it to whether it was teams I coached or teams I've covered in years past. And they did it in a path and a style in which no one has ever had to do it in terms of the teams that they beat that are ranked in the top 5. They beat everybody ranked behind them in the top 5.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I'm a Tennessee fan, right? And we thought we had a chance, and then everybody was bummed after Ohio State beat them pretty, solidly, and then they just whipped Oregon like in the first half, and all of us Tennessee fans were like, oh, okay, well, it's not just us, right? Like, we thought that we're that bad. It's that Ohio State's that freaking good, and it was congrats to them. Pretty awesome to see it happen, and we have some Ohio State fans that follow the show here and chime in here. But Will Howard, incredible job. I know you're a quarterback, and just I didn't know a lot about him coming from Kansas State, but pretty cool stat here. He was the first quarterback since Cam Newton, I think, to first transfer quarterback to win a national title in their first year at a school since Cam Newton. And 2010. Cam Newton was sort of a one of one, as you said. Like, how many Cam Newtons are there? I mean, that guy was nuts, and Will Howard was able to do it, and just some of his throws, man, just dropping dimes in where balls shouldn't be able to get to, and he was just killing it. So it's cool you got that behind the scenes look and be able to talk to these guys and kind of get the firsthand accounts from them. But what a great year for Will Howard.
Yeah, I tell you what, he's a Pennsylvania guy, so a lot of love. Shout out
Yeah,
to
right.
anybody from PA.
Yeah,
For Will Howard, you go back to his path. He was kind of a COVID recruit, meaning like nobody really got to see him. He got injured heading into his, in his junior year in high school. So he wasn't dramatically recruited like normal. He wasn't on the grandest of stages like we see some of these guys, similar to Riley Leonard.
yeah.
Anyway, he goes out to K-State, has an up and down path there. And I love what he did at Ohio State when he showed up. Number one, he poured it into his teammates because he knew what wins. And I saw somebody chime in about NIL. Like, it's a part of the path. The reality is, though, certain things still allow teams to win. And connection and culture, I still think, no matter how much you pay anybody, are the foundation of what gives a team a chance. And you have to have your quarterback, who is, along with the head coach, especially a place like Ohio State, you're the face of the place. And then when you look at how he played, I think all season long for me, he had some really high moments, but he also had some inconsistent moments. And most of the time with quarterbacks, you see them, to me, play really sharp fundamentally early in the season because they had, they had a summer, they had training camp, they had a lot of individual period. So you're working on your feet, your eyes, all this stuff. And then when you get into the season, you can get a little lazy sometimes, or you just don't have the time to really emphasize that because it's game planning, you're playing, you're reacting. I thought we saw Will Howard play his best football in the last month. And when you think about it, he played 16 games. He's played a ton in his career, but only 16 within this system. So we saw him, call it in like year 2, right? Games 13 through 16. We saw him look like a second-year player. And I loved that for him. And you watch his feet, you watch his eyes, and I believe that they're connected to one another. So the visual would be like if you had dental floss from your eyelids to your feet, as you look and scan, your feet are going to follow. Go study him in his last month, whether it's against your Volunteers or the Oregon Ducks, Texas, you name it, and of course the last game. He's really connected. And what I loved about where his balls finish is they all finished on the face mask. And I believe that for quarterback play, like, you have to be able to spin it. You have to be able to have the ball finish on the face mask. You have to make spot throws against teams that are going to play a lot of man coverage like Notre Dame. And he did it, right? And I think that was a fair question coming into the playoff of, can he be accurate consistently throughout the course of a CFP game where the margin for error is so small? And he was. I think he made himself a ton of money. He obviously cemented a legacy very similar to the man that you just showed on the screen in Cam Newton, and had a dramatically more challenging path than Cam Newton. I think that should be the asterisk next to him.
For sure. Well, and, I first of all, I'm drinking out of an Ohio State mug today, giving credit where credit is due. Okay, look.
Yeah, there you go. I'll bring my mini helmet for you. Just we'll love up on the Buckeyes. Yeah,
look at those little Buckeye stickers on there. Yeah, giving them some love. I've got a great deal with Game Time Sidekicks. They provide me with a lot of these mugs for my videos, and so anybody out there, if you're looking, make sure you go GameTimeSidekicks.com. Get you some of these suckers. I mean, they're solid. You hear that? That's solid drinkware right there. Other sponsor, Yogi, got to shout out my sponsors here. Alumni Hall, you see them. I got the hat on today too. A lot of the shirts I wear in my videos come from alumnihall.com. You can order them right there. So I'll order some for you, send you a care package, just so you can wear. Just think of me every time you put them on, basically.
Done, brother. I got you.
That's the actual goal. So I once the playoffs started and I saw Ohio State beat Tennessee like that, I said, okay, I think Ohio State could win the whole thing. But then when it came to time for me to pick a game, not that anybody cares about my picks, they don't, but I picked Notre Dame. I think because I like to go against the grain. Typically, I'm like, everybody's picking Ohio State, I'm going to pick Notre Dame. Like, I tend to just do that, right? Plus, I watched Rudy. That influenced my decision. A good movie, a good cry at the end. I was like, well, I got to pick Notre Dame now. What am I going to do? I just watched Rudy. So, but in my heart, I knew that it probably wasn't going to happen. But incredible game. We got some clips. All right. So I'm going to do my best, commentator here. We're going to look at the clip, just quickly talk about it and then move on. So first one was just this fumble exchange.
Comes in on
Luke, go
third
ahead
down.
and
They
play
got to
this
hurry
clip.
here. Just got the play off, and it never got going.
Boy, how quickly the entire Ohio State defensive line gets off the ball, especially up top with 33 Sawyer.
A little too quick there on the snap. Is that? I mean, this Ohio State had been dominating anyways at this point. But is that just the defense? Are they messing up the O line there, or is this just a oops? We snapped it at the wrong time. I love Quinshon Judkins. He broke off a long run here, and I thought he was going to take it to the house.
Against Tennessee
But,
and Oregon.
let's roll that one real
Had
quick.
to employ that tonight. Judkins breaks free. Quinshon Judkins hits a sprint. And they'll finally run him down at the 5. An explosive play.
Oh, my guy. I miss you, man.
Let's go, man. All right, I saw your face and I was like, that just made me light up. And by the way, Judkins lost himself some Sunday money on that run. You want to tell me that, like, in a world where everybody's worried about speed, a linebacker or a running back getting caught from behind like that by somebody who was way out of the frame, there are going to be people now questioning speed, which is the stupidest thing in the world to me. But it's going to happen.
Probably, yeah. But he's still going to outrun me and you, and probably not Yogi, but you and me. But he couldn't probably handle Yogi. But you and I would be done.
I feel like if the three of us were racing, the back half of it, Yogi's running backwards and he's talking to us. He's encouraging us to get. He's like, "Come on, guys, we're gassed." He's running.
Yeah. We're just trying to get through it. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, guys. I'd just be happy to be running alongside you. How about that?
I love it. All right, Fitz, join now. So we're looking at some clips from the game. We just handpicked a few plays that we're interested in and that were clutch. We got a lot of Ohio State fans in the comments here. We got people spelling their state like they do over there in Ohio, OHIO, which is impressive every time you guys do it that you can spell your state. But we've got.
Can I tell you a spelling story real quick?
Yeah,
you didn't
please.
ask this. Let's go. When the Band Perry was the first time when I was touring with the Band Perry, and the first time we were playing a big festival in Ohio, because I'm a college football nut and I grew up around this. Like I told Kimberly Perry, the singer, I was like, hey, if you yell OH, the crowd will yell IO back. Like they just didn't grow up. Like the three principal Perrys, like Neil, Reed, and Kimberly, were not sports fans at all, really. So they thought I was messing with them. So the whole time, even when KP went up to the microphone to say OH, because they had, like, I'd toured for years and at that point with other artists too. Like, so I'd see the whole phenomenon. You say OH, crowd says IO back to you. Everybody drinks. These summer festivals, it goes huge for country music. But when I told Kimberly that, she really thought I was screwing with her. So, like, she was hesitant to say OH because she was afraid, like, I was setting her up to look like an idiot in front of the mic. So even when it worked, she said OH, the crowd screamed IO back. She turned around and gave me a look like, yeah, there we go. So, like, every time I hear the spelling, I think of that. Like, you can't tour in country music and not say OH every time you're within the state of, even if you're at a truck stop, you're like, OH, somebody says IO back to you.
Oh yeah. It happens everywhere. For those of you who don't know, Fitz was they should have called it the band Fitz back then, but they went with Band Perry. That's all right. But world-renowned violinist. Is that the proper term? Violinist?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up a violinist and became a fiddle player. Like, everybody has the difference. Right. Same instrument. It's just who's paying the bills. So, fiddle player.
There's a young kid here where I live. He was like a prodigy, still is. He's grown up a little bit now, but when he was like 8 years old, he could play the fiddle. And he went on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and they asked him a question. They said, "What's the difference between a violin and a fiddle?" And he said, "A violin has strings, and a fiddle has strings."
That's fair. So, that's a fair. The fiddle's cooler too. Like, because I grew up a fat kid that played the violin. So, like, I got into Juilliard when I was 10. I played Carnegie Hall when I was 10. I was a little like child prodigy classical violinist. There was nothing cool about that. Like, nothing. Like, none of my friends were like, "Oh my God, that's so cool." No, you just didn't tell people you did that on the side. Like, everyone's like, "Oh, that's so cool." Like, no, when the world has changed a lot. Like, the America's Got Talents of the world have created this, like, embrace musical creativity that did not exist when I was a kid. Like, in the late 80s, early 90s, kids were not flocking to be the cool kid that played the violin. Let's just say it that way.
Yes. Well, it's cool to me. So, all right. So but now you're a famous sports expert with Yahoo Sports, and you were with ESPN. Now you're you're still with Yahoo, right?
Yeah. Yahoo's the bread and butter for me. Inside Coverage and the College Football Power Hour, the two main shows at Yahoo.
I love it. Great stuff. I feel like I got to, what am I doing here? Yogi, Roth, and Jason Fitz. Like, what am I doing here? I don't know, but I should just exit out and let you guys run the rest of the show. But we'll go through it, and whenever you guys need to leave, just say so, and then we'll give you a good outro and you can take off. But let's get back here real quick. So Notre Dame finally get the great pass to this guy Greathouse, and just made some great moves. So
in terms of the self-inflicted negatives in the first half.
well, you talk about the negatives there. Sorry, Jason. This next clip we're going to show you was Notre Dame is kind of climbing back, and then they get a roughing the passer call.
Every time. Like, I'm sorry. And I saw Notre Dame fans losing their minds on social media with that. And I was like, that gets called every time.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing. And you knew it. The sideline knew it. The team knew it. Everybody knew it. Like, and the problem so often in these games is it's not, one person making a
empathy when, they're running like this. How do you stop? If he grabbed them and tried to just like hang on, I get it because you're so big, but you're right. And Herbie nailed it of like, it's the follow through. And that will get called, to your point, every time. And I think this felt like, having covered Ohio State all year, like it felt like a lot of their games were like, they're going to get everybody's best, but you can't hurt yourselves. Like, and that's just what it is, because Ohio State's talent across the board is just too good. I mean, Will Howard, what did he start? 13 of 13, right? An all-time record.
And Will Howard, I see David in the comments says nobody's talking about Howard. I mean, I think that's all we've talked about for several days. Like, nationally, you want to talk about the change in play calling, particularly from the Michigan game, everything we saw since then. And Michigan was like this moment where Chip Kelly, I think, wanted to prove the dominance of Ohio State's ability to run the football and be physical. That turned out to be the wrong game plan. After that, man, their ability to move the pocket around, their ability to do half rollouts, all of these things that they were doing to try and get Will Howard at a great rhythm with great weapons. I don't know how you stop that version of Ohio State. When Will Howard's playing efficiently, which he was throughout the course of the playoff, with the weapons that they have to throw to, if you allocate what you need to slow down those weapons, you're going to get run on by two guys that are going to run on Sundays, right? So if you allocate what you need to slow down that run, then you've got a wide receiver group full of guys that are going to play on Sunday that will beat you one-on-one. So, like, it's just – when Will Howard plays that way, I don't know that Superman could have beat this version of Ohio State, honestly.
That's true. Yeah, and back to the point about the D lineman here. If I'm a D lineman and I'm just working my butt off all game, just trying to get to the quarterback, and I break through here, and like I'm about to get him. Like, I can see you just want to. I'm here to tackle him. Like, let me just touch him at least. So I gotta get the temptation to want to be like, you get there, you've made it there, and then you got to pull back. That stinks. But Ohio State had a chance to put it away and had an amazing run here. Ibuka, I think, had the run and then fumbled. So, then it really was stripped by a great play by Notre Dame defense.
Could have had a far bigger differential to Ohio State. I think they dominated this game in ways I don't want to lose sight of.
Yeah, that was like a haymaker. He came in there with that fist and punched that ball out. I mean, he wasn't messing around. Yeah, he had one goal in mind. I'm getting that ball. But Notre Dame did come back. Go get.
I was just the other thing too. There, I see the comments here on the Ohio State defense, and you're right on those. Like, I'll need a day off the longest season, but it was kind of fun to watch this thing play out in the finish as it did.
Yeah, and I think the point you make there is a strong one. By the way, for everyone that says seeding was a problem this year, I agree seeding was a problem in some ways, but I also think that we got the magic of a first-round home playoff game at Notre Dame and at Texas. And if the seeding had been done differently, I do not believe that the entire world.
I won't use the vernacular that you necessarily use, Fitz. I'll say this, just broader in college football. I think we're going to see less teams, quote unquote, take their foot off the gas. Even if you're up 3 or 4 scores, you got to play guys, right? There's only 4 teams. I thought what Ryan Day said after the game was so profound. There's only 4 teams still playing football, period. And they're in the NFL. I get there's bye weeks in the bowl season. You're not playing every weekend, but it's such a long year. Like, let's just take Ohio State. When Julian Sand goes into the game, you got to see what he can do. Like, in this portal era, I don't think teams are just going to be handing it off and ending the game anymore. I think maybe that'll frustrate some of us that are old school as fans next season in the regular season, but you've got to build your depth. I mean, look at Ohio State. And somebody wrote in the comments about that Michigan game and the backup linemen and how they have to shift so much. You're right. Next year, Do they run more of their traditional stuff when they've blown out Michigan State early in the season, when they've blown out other opponents in the season? I think they do. I think that's something we're going to see more coaches do, is try to find out, I'm paying this guy $200,000 to be my backup left guard. Like, can he play? Even though we're up 4 scores and the game's over, like, let's pull him, let's move him, let's add a different protection. Let's see how he can navigate different pressures. Like, I think you have to do that now as a coach. And I don't think that dialogue is getting a lot of play. But if I'm calling a game next year and we're watching a game and it feels as though their teams aren't letting their foot off the gas, because you're right, Fitz, like, teams don't do that. I think now it's going to be even more so. Maybe the tempo won't be fast, but they're going to run their good stuff because they have to find out who can do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I don't think anybody's taking their foot off the gas. That seems wild to do that in a national championship game. I don't think so. And plus, we'll go to this next clip here of Notre Dame. I mean, they mounted a comeback. I mean, it's not like Ohio State had it in the bag the whole time when they were like, well, this is just a cakewalk. No, Notre Dame came back. Let's go to this
Pressure,
clip
Leonard launching. Great house. Major catch.
They get the ball back, and you could look at a game-tying drive, but 3rd and 11, and this happens. I mean, I'm sure the defensive backs coach for Notre Dame wasn't too excited about Smith getting that wide open.
Yeah, I think, at least from my lens, I'm watching the game and you're constantly playing the game out in your head, right? I love what Jason said earlier about the 2-point conversions. Like, they get the one. It's so hard to get them. You don't go into a game with 5 of them. You have your top 2 or 3, and they clearly called their best one and scored on them. Then they have their opportunity to get off the field. And I'm thinking, as I'm watching it, I would have thrown it on 2nd down. Because I'm like, you see 9 guys in the box, or at least around the football, and then your man-to-man coverage on the outside. And I know Chip and Ryan Day enough, and I think Ryan said it afterwards. He wanted to throw it earlier in the drive just to kind of end it. And you're playing the clock, you're navigating all these things. It's a hard thing to do as a head coach and definitely as a play caller, because you want to call a good play, but you're having to decide, like, what matters most. Is it 40 seconds, 30 seconds, get it to the 2-minute mark at the end of the game, or take your swing, and end it? And on 3rd down, I love where both teams put all their chips in. Notre Dame said, this is what we've done best all season long. Put our guys on an island. Like, I love that about it. Like, if you walked into the team room on Monday in advance of the game a week ago, and you're like, okay, guys, we've been playing man coverage, press man all season, but this is Ohio State, so we're going to change everything. Your players are going to look at you and be like, what? What? Really? You don't believe in me? And this is one of the best secondaries in America. And then Ohio State, same deal. Like, you keep saying to me, like, if we're in man coverage, put it up. And I love where both teams said, all right, let's do our best. Let's put it on the line. And for Ryan Day and Chip Kelly saying, it's championship football, let's go for it. I love that. I mean, that to me was the arc of this Ohio State team. As I referenced off the top, I thought this team played tight in the season. I think it was hard to navigate and learn how to navigate all the returners, all the expectations, the leave no doubt mantra that they presented. They didn't play that well all regular season. They never were, to me, anywhere near the team that they look like in the CFP. And then look at what happened after that team meeting, after that Michigan game, and then to finish it like that, saying, we trust this play, this quarterback, this wideout against this defense, let's ride. Same thing on the other side. And to watch it play out, I mean, you got to have a winner and a loser. And I thought it was a beautiful way for this game to end, with best on best and the play being made by one of the teams.
Yeah, and I think your point's an important one, Yogi, because I've heard a lot of people say, well, why would they go man, in these situations? And you just have to understand that you don't suddenly change who you are on defense. Like, you're asking for totally different communication, totally different practice reps, totally different everything. So, I think at some point you have to sort of look at this and say, okay, we're going to play this game with the style of how we got here. That's part of it. The other part of it is they were sending everything they could at Will Howard right there, right? The part of the mindset is like, how do I disrupt what Will Howard's doing? And we have to look at this game. I don't have it in front of me, but I think they were 9 or 12 on 3rd down, 8 or 10 at one point. They were great on 3rd and long. Whatever Notre Dame tried to do on 3rd down, they were getting beat in the chess match. If they tried to drop deep into a zone, they got carved over the middle. If they tried to press everybody up front and go man, they got beat over the top. When they went into man coverage a couple of times, Will Howard waited till everybody dropped into the routes and then suddenly ran for the 1st down. Like, they were getting beat on the chess match of 3rd down over and over and over again. It's one of the most important parts of why this game played out the way it played. In fact, I think one of the most important plays of this whole game was the first down that Ohio, or 3rd down that that Ohio State faced on their very first drive. After 10 minutes on the field, they had a 3rd and 4 where Will Howard had to run around and find somebody open on a 5-yard catch that extended the drive. That was so important because their defense was gassed, but it also showed you a theme for the game. Whatever Notre Dame dialed up on 3rd down, they got beat every single time.
Yeah.
I love the passion from the comments, by the way.
It's
Dave,
good.
Yeah.
A lot of
Appreciate
passion, a lot of
that.
passion. I see you there, David Miller. He's in here. Heisman Dave, we call him, because he likes
Nice.
to. He always wants to talk about the Heisman Trophy. And Yogi did coach, in fact, quite a bit, and was a fantastic coach. I know. But since we're talking about Heisman, real quick here, Yogi, we went to the Heisman ceremony. Give us a little, touch. What was it like? How was it seeing Travis Hunter go in, seeing all the folks there, all the past winners? I mean, give us a little story.
Yeah, the Heisman to me is always just a special environment. My first one I went to was when Reggie Bush won it. I guess that was 05. And Pete Carroll flew the entire staff out. And it was just cool. I remember walking in, I'm 22 years old or whatever, and I'm like, holy man, like, look at all these people. Like, and back then, this was pre-social media, so like everybody came back for it. Now like you get a handful of guys that are always showing up. You see them on the stage. And since then, I've covered a handful of them. I've seen winners like Marcus Mariota and Caleb Williams. I've seen losers like Christian McCaffrey, Bryce Love. That's part of the deal. Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. But it is such a unique environment. My vote would be to have 6-8 players get invited to New York City, because it's such a unique life experience. My college roommate Larry Fitzgerald, who I think should have won the Heisman, didn't, and he was only 3 invited, I believe, that year. Anyway, I come at it from a bunch of different lenses. This year, though, I got to actually go to the production. Like, I got a ticket to go to the actual event. Usually in the media, you're back at the Marriott Marquis in Midtown Manhattan, and you're watching it on the screen. Then they bring the players before the event, and they bring the winner and the coach after the event. This time, I got to go, and it was so cool. I'm in the the bar area, and it's me and whether it's Mario Cristobal or Dan Lanning or Johnny Manziel, like past winners were there. And it was just fun to kind of catch up with guys that I've seen over the course of their careers. And now you're like, damn, you're in your 30s. That to me was like the shocking part. Like these quarterbacks, and they were in high school. And now here they are, like retired, or they're there now in the media or doing whatever they might be doing in their career. So that was kind of the most enjoyable part. And then when the event started, the production is just next level. Chris Fowler is the mayor of college football. Like, he legitimately is. I mean, he just got a presence about him that's powerful and poignant. And then watching the story of Travis Hunter evolve all year, it was cool. And then also, like, for me, I loved like getting to really spend time with Dylan Gabriel's family. Got to be around his mom, Dory. I had a cool conversation with her on my podcast, which was just unique to hear, like, a mom lens. Sometimes we always hear the dad lens because the dads were elite players. Dylan's dad, ironically, he was a quarterback at Hawaii. And when Ty Detmer won the Heisman back in the day, this is a fun fact I learned while I was there. He wins the Heisman on a Saturday. They play their bowl game that day. There's no event. And Dylan Gabriel's dad outduels Ty Detmer, and Hawaii wins their bowl game. And then here's Dylan, 40 years later, whatever it is, and it's his opportunity now. It was just cool, man. And I think for all of us that can easily, and I think a lot of fans feel this way sometimes, you could feel like the game is eroding or the professionalization of college athletes is happening, which it is. You may not, love or feel like the pageantry is somewhat eroding. When you get around and take the helmet off the players, that's not the case. Like, I've been so blown away with the character of Heisman finalists, the teams I've covered this year, the teams in the CFP that I was around, whether it's Oregon, Texas, Ohio State over the majority of the last month. Like, they're really matured. And one might argue, like, the business of college athletics has allowed that to happen even faster. And that's been cool. Like, it really has. So the Heisman was just another illustration of, to me, the reasons why we love the game. Like, I always say my job is to celebrate the game and coach the viewer. And being at the Heisman and celebrating the craft and the seasons those players had was really special.
Yeah, that also speaks, by the way, to, like, I'm not a Heisman voter. I don't know if you are, Yogi. I have a few friends that are. I have a Bolitnikoff Award vote for best wide receiver. That's the best I get. But I will say that there's so much controversy every year over who wins and who should win, and the way people talk about it. And there's a true, like, gravitas to the people that vote. They take the vote really seriously. And I just think that's one thing. Like, same with NFL. I've got friends that have NFL MVP votes. And as much as it's great fodder for debate shows, just the people that have those votes take it like it means something. And again, like I have a Grammy vote and have for many years. I don't like that's something that's not flippant to me. Like when I sit there and decide on something, I realize how much of somebody's life depends on these sorts of things that I'm honored to have a tiny sliver in the decision-making process. I think for the Heisman, it this year particularly became so polarizing for people, Ashton Genty or Travis Hunter. It's easy to have a really loud narrative about what it should be. And I just think that there's at least the people I know that have Heisman votes, man, they take that really seriously and it means something to them. I want to say that out loud because so often people just want to yell about the result. But the people that I know that vote take their small voice in a big thing with a lot of heaviness to it. So I just, it's part of the process that I don't think is broken as much as people yell about it.
Yeah, I'm fortunate this year. I was for the first time a voter for the Debbie O'Brien Award. They must have heard about me playing
Honorable mention
football back in
they
high
saw the
school.
film. Yeah, they saw the
go.
tape.
They saw the film as wide receiver. I mean, I had almost 20 catches in my senior year. So
Look out.
again, a lot of braggadocious happening here. But Jason, you don't have a vote with the Academy Awards, do you? I'm asking
No.
for myself for like the next few years, maybe. Do you have that?
I'm looking for the EGOT. Like I keep joking I'm a nominee got because I got the Grammy noms and the Sports Emmys noms if that counts, but I got nothing towards the Tony or the Academy Awards. Let's so like one step at a time. Like maybe we could write a musical and get it on Broadway. Like we'll have to self-fund it, get it on Broadway, see if we can get ourselves a Tony out of that thing.
Yeah.
We'll need Yogi's dashingly good looks, but that's
right.
That's going to be key. Like he feels like the movie star on the set for sure.
So I love it. Last couple things here before we get out of here. One is the Big Ten kind of dominating the last 2 years, winning the national championship last year and this year, and then Paul Feinbaum with the comment. I don't know if you guys saw this, that the Big Ten at the moment owns college football. Feinbaum, Mr. SEC himself. What do you guys think about Feinbaum's comment and the Big Ten having so much success?
Go ahead, Jason. I'm curious what you
Okay,
think.
so I'll say this.
Yeah.
I think an expanded college football playoff is going to give us more chaos than we've ever seen. And one of the most beautiful things that we got this year is two teams in the championship game that wouldn't have made it in a 14 playoff that didn't match the BCS, any of these things. And we got rightful champion this year. Like Ohio State was clearly, by the end of the year, was clearly the best team in college football. So I love everything about this. But we're now in sort of an NFL society where the Giants beat the Patriots in the year the Patriots were undefeated. Like, so I just think, number one, all the credit in the world to the Big Ten for winning back-to-back championships. It does not have to mean that the SEC is dead. It just means that this is a moment, and this is an incredible moment. And like, my conference is better than your conference is the college football equivalent of my dad can beat up your dad. There's no way to prove it. Nobody really knows any of this. Like we're just yelling from the rafters on what we think based on a few like examples of this. What I think right now is that clearly the best team in college football this year was the Big Ten. Clearly the best teams this year came from the Big Ten. Am I willing to sit here and say that the SEC is broken? No. I mean, if Georgia had been healthy, would it have looked a little different? Maybe. Is Texas going to be really good next year? Yeah. Like, I just think we need to see 3 or 4 years of college football playoff expansion before we make some sweeping generalization that one conference is dead and one conference now reigns supremes. I think we have a much better chance than ever of getting a champion for a few years from this conference and then a champion for a few years from that conference. Like, I think college football is going to end up more balanced than it's ever been. And by the way, y'all, I think that's great for the sport.
That's well said, man. I mean, I lived a world where the conference I had been around for 20 years was picked apart. And and you were constantly comping conferences. And I think that all started based on like TV revenue, right? My conference got this TV deal. My conference got this TV deal. And all of a sudden you're comping them. I think one of the more challenging things to do, I think, is to comp the totality of a conference when there's dramatic inequities. And when Paul's conference is playing, to me, embarrassing opponents in week 11, and teams in the Big Ten or other conferences who play non-conference games are playing rival opponents or big-time opponents in week 11, it's just a totally different conversation. Like, I don't even think you comp it in that regard. I think when you're looking at premium teams, it's hard every year because you're not facing a lot of common opponents. There's a different style of play, I think, within each conference. And I think whether it's the region or the weather or the way the schedule's laid out, like, it's a little bit different. I also think injuries have impacted this. I think whether it's a new coach in year one impacted this. I mean, there's a lot of debate back and forth. The thing that I've never been a fan of is screaming from the rafters. I mean, it's why I started a podcast called Why Option, because I was like, man, there's no dialogue in sports. And I think Paul is clearly the poster for screaming, and that's fine. You know, that's how he makes his money. And I'm not coming at it. I'd say it to his face. I mean, that's just what he does, which is cool. And I love where he came and had a little humility. And we don't see that very often in that regard. And it's entertaining and it's fun and we all laugh about it. But he's also accurate, I think. I mean, it's clearly the Big Ten's year. You look at the last 2 years and you look at UW and Michigan in the championship game. Clearly, that was a Pac-12 team, now a Big Ten team versus a Big Ten team. It was Notre Dame and, of course, Ohio State in this one. So the SEC was the outside looking in for the second straight year. So I think there's a factor there. I think I would probably, have fun having a debate around that. But overall, I don't know. You got to tip your hat to the Big Ten. And I think these two conferences have clearly separated themselves to a large degree. But like there's a world where if you're sitting in the Big 12, and that to me was what the Pac-12 was. The Big 12 is every weekend it's just hyper competitive. Like it was just so hard. And when teams have early season losses, I think generally as a college football society, we toss that conference out. And maybe to Jason's point, this expanded playoff is we're not going to do that. I wonder moving forward if we're going to have this conference debate or if it's just going to be team debate. You know, like you don't ever say the NFC West is better than the AFC West. You don't have that conversation. You just talk about the teams in there. So I think it'll be fun to see like the brands grow within these conferences as these conferences continue to grow. Because when you have an 18 team and a 16 team league, how many times are teams playing each other? I mean, look at Alabama and Georgia. They had an epic game this year. The last time they played each other outside of the pandemic season, which was only conference games, was about a decade ago. You know, so I'd be curious, like, how do these things get navigated, even if the SEC adds a ninth conference game, which they should, and they'll get paid for that TV dollar wise. Do they add more marquee matchups because you can lose a game or two and it's be okay? Or do they say, no, like, I want to make sure that I end the season with one loss and we find our way to the playoff? Like, I think that is probably even a deeper discussion than, you know, who's the best conference. And I don't think it is a discussion. Big Ten clearly was that over the last really 2 years, I would argue.
Yeah.
I like
and by the way,
on that.
Yeah, Yogi, I agree with you. The Big Ten clearly the best conference this year. What does that mean for next year? I like that's the one thing to me. I just think we have to. And look, ESPN changed my life. I have nothing but love for ESPN. They absolutely changed my platform and gave me so much. I love those people. And Paul's a friend of mine. I just have to remind the world when we see these topics that, like, when you go in, I hosted First Take. I've been on these shows. Like, when you go into them, you are asked to take a definitive stand one way or the other. They present you a topic and they want you to be definitive one side or the other. I think we have to remember sometimes these conversations are just a hell of a lot more nuanced than we want to make them. Like, you know, what the best conference is this year, Big Ten was the best conference. Great. What does that mean for next year? Means that next year, another conference will have the opportunity. Like next year, it could be the SEC, could be the Big Ten. Who knows? That's just not like Mike Good just doesn't make for great ESPN, right? Like it totally has to be. It has to be one way. It's like, it's not called First Fair and Reasonable Conversation. It's called First Take for a reason. So I just remind everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fun debate. And clearly your commentary on that side there is into it, which is great for your show, man. So, well, who knows? We'll see. I think it's interesting too. Like Texas is year one in the SEC, and I love it. You got to get claimed by your conference and claim your conference. Same thing with Oregon in the Big Ten. Year one in the Big Ten, embrace the conference, be claimed by the conference. That's reality. But it also is a unique year in realignment, which I think will be fun to see where this next phase goes. Like, I'd be curious, Josh, we come back in 5 years, like what happens in college football? Is there a separation of these two leagues? Do we go back to the regional format? Like, either way, I think that it's good when the games are great. It's good when you've got more teams and have a slice and an opportunity to reference Arizona State or Boise State or SMU. I think that was great for college football. Even if a team from the SEC or a team from the Big Ten is left out of it, I just believe, from calling games on the West Coast for a lot of my career, now this year being in the Midwest and the East Coast, like, there's good football everywhere, you know, and because you have a fandom about your region or your league doesn't mean there's not really talented football. I mean, look at ASU's run. I mean, they're a play away from being in the semifinals. I mean, you can't argue that. I mean, it was right there. Yeah, you can't argue the game. So I love it, though. To me, I'd love to see more crossover non-conference games in the playoff. I would love if you didn't get to play a team from your own league in the first two rounds. Who knows what'll shake out with the adjustments, but there is diversity in scheme. There is dramatic inequities in scheduling. And I'd be curious to see if we can all get that on the same page. That'd probably be the first thing I would do if you said, hey, what make all the changes you want in college football, number one, I'd get everybody on the same playing field schedule wise. I think that allows even the people in the room in the committee to have more thoughtful, informed opinions on who is who, especially late in the season.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I'm curious to see how things evolve with the scheduling and whatnot. Cause like the NFL, like you said, is very regional, right? You play where you literally live, where you just like, in the part of the country. I do kind of miss that. It's very awkward to me having Stanford come over and play in the ACC. That just doesn't feel normal to me. I don't really love that. But I do, having kind of grown up in the SEC kind of world with a little bit of ACC mixed in just because of where I live in the country, definitely what I've done in college football has allowed me to get beyond that conference and like look and start to appreciate more of the Pac-12 and the Big Ten and some other conferences in the Big 12 even, and really learn more about them and see this. Really, I don't really understand why it's like this conference versus that conference, like which one's better. I don't think it really matters. I think it's just it's like which team's better than which team, right? So Alabama goes up to Camp Randall, beats Wisconsin. That doesn't make the SEC a bit better than the Big Ten. That just makes Alabama better than Wisconsin during that game, right? Ohio State beat Tennessee in the playoffs doesn't necessarily mean the Big Ten's better than the SEC. It means Ohio State's better than Tennessee. Like, I like the individual matchups. Still looking at like, oh, this conference better or that conference is better. It's just fair to say the Big Ten kind of, if you're going to pick somebody this year, you got to pick the Big Ten. I mean, they won the championship. They kind of had the best success of the year. But I mean, it only matters like what you're saying, Yogi. I'd love to see more good teams from each conference play each other. That can give us a better measuring stick as to if people want to compare conferences. So
cool, man.
That's my take on that. I love somebody coming in and go Vols. Erica,
there you go.
Go Vols, baby. That's all that matters. All right, one last thing before we go. I'm going to get throughout the season, you guys may have seen. I'm sure everybody was looking at the Josh Mancuso top 25 every week. So yeah, I put out my very own top 25 every week. That was always usually different than the AP or whatever. So mine was obviously the correct one, like it was the right one. So this is my final top 25. All right, for the season. We got a mistake here. Ohio State's supposed to be number one. Notre Dame's supposed to be number two. So we already messed up the beginning there. So those are flip-flop. Aside from that, you pick it apart. Tell me where because
pick it apart. I don't know that I would pick it apart necessarily. I think you can make a compelling argument for the downfall of, like, I could put Penn State ahead of Texas, I think, but I don't really I'm not passionate about that one way or the other. I could put Tennessee ahead of Arizona State, but I'm not passionate about that. This feels pretty good. And as I read through this, I'm also reminder of what might've been for Miami. My God, you've got Miami at 18, which feels about right. And I just keep thinking about how Miami was a couple of plays away from being in the college football play. Like, it's just amazing how different that turned out. But I wouldn't pick this about. You should have UNLV on here too. All the way, I usually have a UNLV helmet behind me, being from Vegas. You should have UNLV in there instead of Navy. We'll kick Navy out. Forget Navy. Put UNLV at 25. Other than that,
I was not into UNLV or Memphis being in the top 25 or Tulane. I was never on board with those. I never felt like they were really UNLV, maybe, but not Memphis and Tulane.
We almost got the weird. Remember, because it's the 5 highest ranked conference champions. Yeah. There is a very weird situation where the highest ranked conference champion from the group of 5 next year, when there's not Ashton Genty and Boise State, you could have a highest ranked group of 5 champion that's not even a top 25 team. That's what everyone's going to lose their minds when, like, the 30th team in the country suddenly sneaks into the college football playoff, and it's like it's Memphis, and nobody's watched a second of Memphis football all year. That, like, people will lose their minds.
Yeah, to me, I wonder like what your top 25. I'd have to go back and review your IG or your social on it of like pre-final bowl game. Yeah. Because as I'm looking at this, I'm looking at, okay, what teams rolled with their strongest roster in their bowl game? Like in Miami, and Cam Ward plays in the second half. Yeah. Are they ranked 14th ahead of Syracuse? Probably. Right. I mean, that to me would be kind of the one thing. To me, also looking at this, I'm also in my brain, I'm like, all right, who's going to line up at quarterback for all these teams next year? Yeah. And I think it's going to be fun. Like you look at Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, they're all going to have a different QB, which I think it's a quarterback-driven sport. I think it's kind of cool. You know, Arizona State brings back a guy who will be on every cover of every magazine, right? Tennessee, of course, with Nico and company. Who's going to be the guy at Ole Miss now for Lane? Clemson, Cade's going to roll on back. So I think that'll be kind of fun. You know, Indiana gets Fernando Mendoza out of Cal in the portal. I think he's a version of Curtis Rourke. You know, Miami obviously made a huge change in what's the health of Carson Beck. I think Illinois preseason they'll be like top 10. I went through their schedule just because, I mean, they play at Indiana, they get USC at home, Ohio State at home, but they miss the rest of the power programs in the Big Ten. Like, there's a world where all of a sudden we're talking about Illinois being like the Indiana next year, being the playoff team. If I had to say it now, like, who's that outside sexy team? I'd pick them heading into next season.
Yeah, in Indiana, it comes down to earth a little bit. Their schedule much harder next year than it
well
was
said,
this year.
man. Well said.
Love it. Love it. We can go back. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Good times. Yogi, tell us your podcast, man. You got some great content. I love it, even on Threads and stuff. Tell us about some of the stuff you're doing.
Yeah, check it out. It's called Y Option. You go to yoption.com. Try to do like thoughtful dialogue around college football through the lens of the West Coast. So not screaming, but hopefully laughing and hopefully informing. We do a newsletter once or twice a week. We do, in the season, we had 2 episodes a week. Now we're down to 1. So I got to make sure in this off season, if you two have time, I'd love to have both of you guys on it. But it's been fun. Like ever since the Pac-12 obviously adjusting in the way they did, I was like, man, I've built hopefully trust among a fan base in the western part of the country. And now I'm going to go cover all these teams in the East. Let's see if we can merge those things. So calling games for the Big Ten and Fox has been a blast. And then doing this as a supplementary element has been just really enjoyable. And you guys know, as creatives and artists, like, you want an outlet. So it's been fun to have that for myself and a couple of people we have working on it. So we got a fun podcast dropping out today. Ben Hartsock, who won a natty at Ohio State. So check that out. And we got a couple of fun coaches coming up. And I'm going to head down to other parts of the country. I'm going to head down to the SEC in a couple of weeks and get to interview some people down in that part of the world. So it'll be fun to kind of take this thing on the road a little bit here in the offseason. Love
it, man. It's good seeing you, dude. So thanks for joining. We'll let you go, and then I'll hang out with Jason for just a minute, and then we'll have you back. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you. Fitzy, tell everybody what you're doing and where people can follow you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, Yahoo Sports. So you can check out Inside Coverage. That's our NFL podcast 3 days a week. And then the College Football Power Hour is the college football podcast that I'm on for Yahoo. And then I'm also Fox Sports Radio on the weekends with the fellas hanging out. So, just doing the thing. And by the way, Yogi, one of the nicest guys in the business. So love seeing his face. And anybody that hasn't checked Yogi out, you should check him out a million times.
Totally, man. Thanks for all your great commentary and love following you on social too. You got some good stuff. Thanks for watching my videos and liking them occasionally, or are you the one leaving the mean comments on my videos, or is that another Jason?
No, that's one of my burners. So I got burners galore. Like, oh, my burners have burners at this point. That's how, like, David in the chat is actually me. While we were talking, I was just coming at the whole show. I'm David in the chat. It's just like the keyboard, the cat meme
just
thing.
Rocking it.
That's me.
I love it, man. Well, thanks for joining. We'll let Jason go. I'm gonna hang on by myself just for a minute to close out the show. But Jason, thanks for joining, man. I'll talk to you soon. See you, buddy. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm riding solo today. Caleb's out doing stuff and couldn't join, but he'll probably be back next week. We'll keep going. Listen, those two guys, Yogi and Jason, top drawer. You need to follow them 100%. They do know what they're talking about. Miller, I don't know what you're talking about here in the comments. We try to get to as many comments as we can, but you've got like 1,000 comments in here, so we just can't address every comment, and especially just one person's comments over and over. So try to keep. Plus, I wanted to give them a chance to give their commentary, and talk. Smart guys. I mean, we're talking really interesting people as well. Both these guys have been, Jason's a Grammy-nominated musician, and then went into sports and was on ESPN and was really good and is plugged in. And Yogi, played quarterback for Pitt, coached quarterbacks at USC, and now is in sports reporting himself. So great, two great guests. I'm excited to have been here. Make sure you guys are checking alumnihall.com. Look, I don't have a shirt on right now, but I'm wearing the hat. But if you go there, you just scan the the code there, you can get. They don't have every team, but they've got a lot of teams out there. A lot of teams that if you guys follow my stuff, a lot of teams I represent there: Tennessee, Georgia, Clemson. A lot of teams, shirts and hats and all the team gear. If I'm wearing one of those teams in a video, it's probably from them. So go check them out and buy something. Get somebody a gift. Even if you're not a fan of one of the teams there, you can give somebody else. So anyways, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Alumni Hall for sponsoring. And we will see you next week. See y'all. Bye.